Sorry about that. So welcome everyone again. My name is Ankur Patel, Director of Advancement for Hindu University of America. And thank you for joining us for Yoga in the Bhagavad Gita with our esteemed panelist, Dr. Sriram Sorvatam. And HUA, Hindu University of America, has been able to pull together intellectual heavyweights in so many different aspects of Hindu Dharma and society, from yoga to Ayurveda. And Dr. Sriram Sarvatam is one of those. He's been an ardent practitioner of yoga since childhood. He's been teaching yoga since 1991, including in India. Sriramji is a founding member of Ekashri Schools of Yoga and is also a faculty member of the teacher training program of Yoga Bharti. Sriramji is a recipient of the Exemplary Service Award in Yoga given by the Consulate General of India in 2015 and the Yoga Service Award given by ISKCON in 2009. I think you've been guest teaching at some courses, Sriramji, but you haven't had a course yet at Hindu University of America. This is going to be your first. Am I correct in that? And we are all looking forward to that. Thank you for joining us for that. And let me just hand it over to you because I know you have a presentation that we can just jump into. If you have questions, put them in the Q&A box. The chat is open. Let's enjoy this beautiful webinar and see where it takes us. Sriramji.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ankurji. So let me quickly share the presentation slides. Okay. So let me begin with the Dhyana Shloka on Bhagavad Gita. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Grathitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitaamritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvam Anusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshini Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshini Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshini. Namaste everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today to discuss about the yoga in the Bhagavad Gita. In fact, I was tempted to rename as the yogas, plural, yogas of the Bhagavad Gita, but we will see in a few moments that all these are beautifully synthesized as one in the Bhagavad Gita. So when we are interested in the practices of yoga, especially in this day and age, yoga has become so popular, and most people's first introduction to yoga is in the form of yoga asanas, pranayama, meditation, and so forth. And with the practice of yoga, there comes curiosity and even a yearning to connect with the roots of yoga. What are we doing in these practices? What is the ultimate objective of these practices? And also about the mechanics of the practices themselves. Why do we do asanas? What are the benefits of pranayama that are different from asanas and so forth? What is the role of bhakti? How can I understand the principles of karma yoga, the yoga of action and so forth? So there is this curiosity and yearning that comes. And in order to get in touch with the roots of yoga, two texts have become very popular, especially, for example, in yoga teacher training programs, and especially as an introduction to the philosophy of yoga, the basic tenets of yoga. Bhagavad Gita and the Patanjali Yoga Sutras are perhaps the starting points of people who want to go deeper into the knowledge of yoga, the foundational tenets of yoga practices. And in my own experience, I can say that the study of the yoga principles, the foundations of yoga, profoundly elevates the quality of the yoga practice. So in this course, in the Yoga of the Bhagavad Gita, we are going to explore the foundations of yoga as given in the Bhagavad Gita, and also we will complement the study with principles from the Patanjali Yoga Sutras as well. They both complement each other so beautifully, we will find out. So in the next about 40 minutes or so, I will give an overview of the yoga that is contained in the Bhagavad Gita. I would like to begin with this following verse in the Bhagavad Gita. In fact, this is the last verse of the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna is addressed as Yogeshwara, the Lord of Yoga. Let me chant this verse. Yatra Yogeshwara Krishnaha, Yatra Partho Dhanurdharaha, Tatra Shrir Vijayo Bhutihi, Dhruvanitir Matir Mama. So before we jump into the meaning of this verse, I'd like to point out that this is a very important verse in the Bhagavad Gita, also selected as the Eka Shloki. So scholars have chosen this specific verse as the Eka Shloki, which means the one verse in the Bhagavad Gita that captures the essence of its teachings. So if we were to select one verse out of the 700 verses of the Bhagavad Gita, then you would pick this verse. The scholars have picked this verse that goes to the heart of the teachings of Bhagavad Gita. So this is a very important verse. And let us see what it says. Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna. That means wherever there is Krishna, wherever there is Yogeshwara Krishna, there's adjective Yogeshwara, the Lord of Yoga. Wherever there is the Lord of Yoga, Krishna. And Yatra Partho Dhanurdharaha, where there is Arjuna who is ready to fight with his bow in his hand. When these two come together, and we are going to see a little later, they are metaphors, symbols. We can use them in practical way. What does it mean in practice? We see that in a moment. So when there is Krishna and when there is Arjuna, Tatra Shrihi Vijayaha Bhutihi Dhruva Nitihi Matihi Mama. That means when these two come together, there is Shrihi, there is prosperity, there is abundance. Vijayaha, there is victory. Bhutihi, there is abundance, there is glory. And Dhruva Nitihi, there is a firm orderliness, there is right conduct, righteousness. Matihi Mama, that is my opinion, says Sanjaya, who spoke this verse. So these words are by Sanjaya, who is talking to the king Dhritarashtra. So he says, wherever there is Krishna and wherever there is Arjuna, then you have all these qualities, these attributes, the success. So what does it mean? Yogeshwara Krishna. So we can think of Krishna as the divine spark that resides within the heart of all beings. So with the practice of yoga, when we get in touch with that divine presence that resides in the heart of all beings. So for example, when we go to a yoga class, the first thing that we hear when people introduce themselves is Namaste. And we discover the meaning of Namaste. The divine in me honors, respects, reveres, acknowledges the divine in you. So how to get in touch with this divine presence? There is a spark of divinity where Krishna resides. In fact, in one of the verses, in the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Aham Atma Gudakesha Sarva Bhutashaya Sthitaha. That means I reside as the Atman, the self, in the heart of all beings. So in the heart of all beings, there is this divine spark. And when we are in touch with that divine spark, when we abide in that space of divine presence, and when we are ready for action, that's what Yatra Partho Dhanurdharaha means. So Arjuna or Partha represents the warrior who is ready to express that divine calling, to express the divinity within with inspired action, with dynamic action. So that's what Dhanurdaraha means, who is ready to perform his duties, to align with the calling within. So when these two come together, then success happens. There is Vijayaha, Bhutihi, Dhruva, Nitihi, Matihi, Mama. So that is the message of this verse. And as I said earlier, scholars have singled out this verse as the Ekashloki, the one message of the Bhagavad Gita that captures the heart of the teachings. Now let us look into these two parts. The first part is the reposing in the self, how to abide in the self, Yogeshwara Krishna, how to get in touch with the divine presence within. So that is the one of the aspects of yoga, which is called a nivritti. Nivritti is the path of introspection, so that we get in touch with the divine presence within. Now, why aren't we in touch with that already? Because we get caught up in the turbulence of the mind. So in yoga, we call these as the vrittis, the chitta vrittis, the turbulence in the mind or the activities of the mind. And we seem to be entrapped by these vrittis. So we cannot see the divine presence within. It is not so clear because it is blocked by the disturbance of the mind. Perhaps we are not in touch with the divine space because we get caught up in the periphery. We are not abiding in the center. It is like an analogy where if the surface of the lake is very turbulent, we cannot see the depth of the lake. To see the pearls that reside in the depth of the lake, we cannot see them because we get caught up in the turbulent waves. Like that, our mind is so turbulent. In fact, in the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which is titled Dhyana Yoga, also called Atma Samyama Yoga, the chapter on meditation, and the chapter on self-control, Atma Samyama. There, after Krishna gives a big list of step-by-step methods to quiet the mind, Arjuna asks a very interesting question. He says, whatever you say so far to quiet the mind, to silence the mind, seems very nice to hear and all. But guess what? My mind is so turbulent. Chanchalam hi mana Krishna, pramati balavadridam. Tasyaham nigraham manye vayoriva sudushkaram, he says. That means, chanchalam, my mind is so turbulent. It is so unruly. I don't think this meditation is for me. It could be for somebody else. Maybe I am the one exception in this universe. But my mind is like the wind. It is like a hurricane. My teacher used to say, it is like the category 6 hurricane. It is so unruly. I don't think I can quiet the mind. This is not for me, Arjuna says. And in response to that, Krishna says, Asamshayam mahabaho manodur nigraham chalam abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena cha grihyate. That means, no doubt, Arjuna, everyone's mind is like that. It is the nature of the mind to be like that, to be agitated. But it can't be brought under control using abhyasa, practices, and vairagya, detachment. So these two keys of yoga, of nivritti yoga, of reposing in the self, is given in the Bhagavad Gita. And the same teaching you find in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras as well. Patanjali gives the sutra, Abhyasa Vairagyabhyam Tannirodha. Same teaching. In order to quiet the mind, in order to silence the vrittis of the mind, you need Abhyasa and Vairagya. And this illustrates the contrasting styles of the teaching methods. Patanjali gives that as a bullet point, Abhyasa and Vairagya, to silence the mind. But look how Krishna gives it to his friend. So when Arjuna asks the question, my mind is so turbulent, it is not just his question, it is all of our question as well. When we practice meditation, perhaps we think it's a good idea to still the mind and to experience some inner silence. And then 2 minutes into meditation, we discover that, oh, my mind is wandering all over the place. It is not for me. So when Arjuna asks that question, It is our own question. He's echoing what is going on in our own mind. And when Krishna answers that question, that answer is not just for Arjuna, it is for all of us. He's guiding Arjuna. He says, Asamshayam Mahabahu. No doubt, he says. He's talking to his friend. So whenever I read the Bhagavad Gita, I can feel the presence of this loving friend, loving guide, who is step by step holding my hand and taking me towards progress in yoga, guiding me step by step. And the same teaching, Abhyasa and Vairagya, is presented as Asamshayam Mahabahu. No doubt, what you say is correct. But, dear friend, the mind can be silenced. And these are the methods, Abhyasa and Vairagya, he says. And then, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna also goes on to say, what are the Abhyasas to be practiced? For example, there is mention about asanas. There is a definition of pranayama that is given in the Bhagavad Gita, 4th chapter. You see the definition of pranayama. Why do we need to do both these practices? How do the practice of asanas and pranayama and pratyahara, all the 8 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga that Patanjali gives, you find them in the Bhagavad Gita as well. And then we also discover what are the unique roles of these practices. How do they affect the 3 gunas, the sattva, rajas, and tamas? Let me give an example. It is said that the practice of pranayama reduces tamoguna. Tamas literally means darkness. As we know, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, lead me from darkness to light. So in order to reduce the cloud of ignorance, when the mind feels cluttered, when it is entrenched in tamas, the best way to remove the cloud of tamas is through the practice of pranayama. And how does it work? We will see that in the Bhagavad Gita and complementing our study with the Yoga Sutras as well. So in contrast, asanas reduce rajoguna. Predominantly, it reduces rajoguna. And you can see how they complement each other so beautifully. So all these principles, how when we put together all these different components of Abhyasa, we create a holistic system. It's such a powerful practice. In fact, the power of all these nivritti practices, where we abide in the self, the power of these practices comes from combining these different elements, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, and so forth. All these come together so beautifully, they work in synergy. Their combination of these practices is so much more powerful than the mere sum of their parts. So how does this synergy work? All this we will discover through the verses of the Bhagavad Gita and some of the sutras from Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. We'll also discover what we can do outside the yoga mat to help with this Nivritti Marga. What can we do in our day-to-day life and habits? How can we align our diet? How can we align our actions that we do outside? How can I align my activities outside of work, like vihara, that means rest and activity, how we can organize our life around the central theme of quieting the mind. So not just what we do inside the yoga mat, but also outside the yoga mat, how we can help in this process of yoga of introspection, Nivritti Marga. We'll also study the mechanics of the mind, how to transform a habitually distracted mind. If the mind is so distracted, the habit of the mind, it takes us away from our center. And how is it that we can create an inner transformation? How can we transform the mind, the mechanics of the mind? We will study using these scriptures. And we'll also study a very important topic called Sankhya. Samyak khyayate prakashyate iti Sankhya. The definition of Sankhya is that which presents the most excellent truth, the highest truth is Sankhya. And for example, if we study the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, Patanjali assumes that the reader is familiar with Sankhya. So the practices of yoga are founded on Sankhya philosophy, on Sankhya Yoga. And what are the basic tenets of Sankhya philosophy? It is beautifully described in the Bhagavad Gita. The 2nd chapter is called Sankhya Yoga. And there are also teachings of Sankhya Yoga that we in the chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Kshetra Kshetrajna Vibhaga Yoga. So in that chapter also, we see teachings of Sankhya. So when we read the foundations on which the practices of yoga are built, namely the Sankhya philosophy, it will deepen our understanding about yoga as well, and why we are doing all these practices, and also how these gunas fit in, the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. In fact, there's a whole chapter in the Bhagavad Gita on the three gunas, Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga, which is the 14th chapter. And we will dedicate one full session on that to understand these principles of the three gunas and how can we work together with the three gunas in harmony. And then when we abide in ourselves, when the mind becomes tranquil, when we transcend the vrittis of the mind, we discover our swadharma. What is our inner calling? What am I here to do in this life? How can I make my life more meaningful? It's like a bird discovers its swadharma to soar in the sky, to fly, to soar in the sky and to express itself, not to be encaged, entrapped. So how can we allow the inner calling to give it life so that we express the divinity within? And we will discuss about the Swadharma, some of the key verses in the Swadharma as well. So this is the first part, the Nivritti part, abiding in ourself and listening to the true calling of the self. This is one half of the yoga, Yogeshwara Krishna. What about the second half? Yatra Partho Dhanurtaraha, a person who is ready to act. Partho Dhanurtaraha gives a picture of Arjuna who is ready to take on the action, dynamic action. Dhanurtaraha gives a picture of readiness to act. So when we talk about action, because karma abounds, everywhere we see there is activity. Even when we are asleep, there is activity in the body. The heart pumps, we keep breathing, there is blood circulating. Even when we do meditation, when we are experiencing meditation, there is activity there as well. Again, the physiological processes are active. In fact, there is a verse in the Bhagavad Gita that says, Nahi kaschit kshanamapi jatu tishtati akarma kriti. Not even for a fraction of a second can we be devoid of karma in the material world. In this prakriti, in this nature, you find activity abounds. So karma is everywhere. So how can we understand karma and the karma bandha? Because sometimes, because of ignorance and because of lack of awareness or perhaps carelessness, we get into trouble by experiencing the consequences of karma, which are not very pleasant. For example, we are tempted to eat junk food, and the next day we have to bear the unpleasant consequence of a tummy ache. That's what is karma bandha, that which causes suffering because of our past karma. And how do we understand that? How do we negotiate this world of karma so that we don't get entrapped in suffering, so that it doesn't bind us into the future? So Bhagavad Gita throws a lot of light on this. In fact, some of the most famous verses in the Bhagavad Gita are around this topic of karma, karma phala, karma bandha, and so forth. We'll also discuss the law of karma. What does it mean? And we will go in-depth study on this topic. For example, does law of karma mean that we live in a fatalistic universe, deterministic universe, where everything is set in stone? So where does freedom come in? Where does free will come in this complex web of karma, karma phalas, and the karma bandhas? In fact, we will see what are the teachings associated with karma that doesn't bind us into the future. This is a very interesting topic in the Bhagavad Gita, and also Patanjali throws light on this in the Yoga Sutras. He says there are some karmas, there are some actions that we can do that will not bind us in the future. So what are those kind of karmas? We will study them as well. So when we negotiate our life in this complex web of karma, Krishna gives a very interesting teaching, karmasu kaushalam. In fact, he defines, that's one of the definitions of yoga, karmasu kaushalam. Skill in action is one way to interpret that. We can also interpret it as excellence in action. So what does skill in action mean? Performing our action so that we don't receive any suffering because of it. We don't receive any negative karma bandhas, karma phalas. So in fact, this word kaushalam comes from kusha. Kusha is a form of grass, kusha grass, that yogis actually collect kusha grass and they make a seat out of it. They place kusha grass and then a leather on top and a cloth on top and sit on it for meditation. In fact, the English word cushion comes from the Sanskrit word kusha, kusha grass. And this kusha grass is very interesting. It's very sharp. The edge of the kusha grass is like a blade, very sharp. So when the students uh, they go to the forest to pluck this kusha grass, they need to be very careful so that they don't injure themselves on their fingers. They don't cut themselves on the fingers. So they need to be very careful, very mindfully to pluck the kusha grass. That's why karma sukaushalam literally means the actions that you do so that you don't injure yourself, so that you don't get entrapped in the sufferings of the karma, karma sukaushalam. And we will go more deeper into this aspect as well during the course. And then what is meant by karma yoga? Because karma abounds, but what is karma yoga? What do we mean when we discipline karma, disciplined action? And where does the discipline come? We will explore that topic as well. We will also see the similarities and how we can complement our understanding of karma yoga with kriya yoga that is presented by Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras. Patanjali describes kriya yoga, second chapter of the Yoga Sutras. He describes kriya yoga. That is also translated as yoga of action. And in the context of yoga practices, kriyas refer to cleansing actions. And we will see how they complement each other beautifully, karma and kriya. And one of the key aspects of kriya yoga is tapas. Tapas can be translated as austerity or intense practice or even heating the system, going through the discomfort of doing the right thing, although it's uncomfortable in the short term. That is tapas. And Bhagavad Gita gives profound insights on tapas. 17th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, it gives 6 verses on tapas that we will explore in detail. It talks about the tapas of the body, tapas of speech, Vangmaya tapas, and tapas of the mind, Manomaya tapas, and how we can integrate these practices in our daily life. How can we use the power of tapas in refining our actions and also our meditation? So this is the second part, the part of pravritti, dynamic action. In fact, one of my teachers, Sri Ravi Shankarji, he puts it very nicely. He gives the acronym IPOD, 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 inner peace and outer dynamism. So the first part, the Nivritti Marga, is the inner peace. We are anchored in the stable presence within, samatvam, that equilibrium. We are perfectly balanced. That's the inner peace. And then the second part is the outer dynamism, the dance of action. We express our actions joyfully. So that is the second part. And as they say, buy 2, get 1 free, there's also a third part. Synthesis of these two together, bringing the bhakti. Because when we talk about Partho Dhanurtaraha, Partho Dhanurtaraha, Partha Arjuna is not just a skillful and dynamic actor. He is also a devotee of Krishna. It's very interesting to see how Arjuna relates to Krishna during the course of the Bhagavad Gita. So before the Bhagavad Gita, the relationship between Arjuna and Krishna was that of a friend, Sakhi, friend. And then in the second chapter, when Arjuna collapses on his knees because he is now in a dharma sankata, he doesn't know what is the right thing to do. In the dharma sankata, he seeks knowledge, and he says, Shishyasteham chadimam tvam prapannam. I am your student. Please enlighten me. I look up to you as a guru. Please enlighten me. What should I do? So from a Sakhi, from a friend to a guru, and then by the time we come to the 7th, 8th, and then the 10th and the 11th chapters, especially the 11th chapter, the Vishwarupa Darshana, Arjuna becomes a devotee of Krishna. And what is devotion? What is bhakti? The 12th chapter of the Gita talks about that, bhakti yoga. So we see Arjuna as a bhakta. In fact, there's a very interesting verse in the 11th chapter where Arjuna says, Sakheti matva prasabham yaduktam, He Krishna, He Yadava, He Sakheti, Ajanata mahimanam tavedam. That means, I didn't know that you are such a great person. I took you for granted, just like my friend. But now I know that you are a Mahatma, you are a great soul. So please forgive me for taking you for granted, is what Arjuna says. So what is the role of bhakti? Why is bhakti so powerful? Because whenever we do our actions through emotionally charged action, it becomes very powerful. Many times we see that the actions, the powerful actions come from negative emotions. For example, somebody is angry and you can actually see the fire coming out of their mouth when they say something to insult another person. It is very sharp, very powerful action, but sometimes, in fact, most of the times, powerful actions come from people who are distressed, negative emotions, but we can turn it around. In fact, there is a verse in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says, Sakta karmanya vidvamsaha yatha kurvanti bharata kuryat vidvams tatha saktaha chikirshur loka sangraham. That means, just like how people who are in negative emotional states, Sakta karmanya vidvamsaha, when they are attached to something with negative emotion like desire or passion or anger, rage, and so forth, when they do their actions with so much intensity, Krishna says to Arjuna, turn it around, come from a positive space, be in a place of bhakti and use bhakti to do the action with the same intensity. In other words, use bhakti to empower your actions, not negative emotions. So when we are in bhakti, the actions that we do are inspired action. We do it out of love. We are expressing that fullness of bhakti in our heart. In fact, this is the true meaning of the word puja. Puja literally means Purnat Jayate iti puja. That which is born out of fullness of devotion in the heart. That is puja. And when we connect all these three together, namely abiding in oneself, dynamic action, and bhakti in the heart, then we can transform every little action of our daily life, even the mundane actions like washing dishes or folding clothes or driving to work. Every little action can be transformed to something more meaningful. We can transform the mundane to the spiritual. And that is perhaps one of the most profound teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, that we can engage in the world, but we totally turn around why we are doing these actions. It is not because of any obligation, but it is because of love. We are expressing the divinity within, with full of bhakti in our heart. We do our actions, we empower our actions with our the bhakti in the heart. So let me conclude. Okay, before I conclude, so this is the plan for the 11 weeks of the Bhagavad Gita course. So we're going to start on April 10th, Saturday, and we'll meet every Saturday for 90 minutes. And these are the different topics that we will cover, starting with the focus on Dharma on the first chapter. And then we will proceed to Sankhya, because the Sankhya is the foundation of the Yoga Sutras. And we will see the Sankhya teachings from the Bhagavad Gita. And we will progress through the other aspects of yoga presented in the Bhagavad Gita. So let me conclude with one final verse, the value of knowledge. So one of the objectives of this program, this 11 weeks, is not just to stuff the mind with more information, not just to stuff our memory with more information. It is for transformation. It is not information, but it is for the sake of transforming ourselves, transformation. And that's a very beautiful verse in the 4th chapter that captures this teaching. Nahi jnanena sadrisham pavitramiha vidyate tatsvayam yoga samsiddhaha kalenatmani vindati. There is no purifier that is greater than jnana, the fire of knowledge, the fire of awareness is so powerful. It cleanses our body and mind. And when we reside in jnana yoga, when we are in jnana, then in due course of time, we experience the benefits of yoga. So with this, allow me to conclude. Thank you for your enthusiastic listening. Over to you, Ankurji.
Thank you. Thank you. That was amazing. I've dropped information for the course in the chat. You can click there, the time and date. Please enroll in this class. It's going to be amazing. This is something that in 40 minutes, look at what Sri Ramji was able to share and articulate and explore in 40 minutes. Imagine what he's going to be able to do in 11 weeks if you give him the time and your focus and your energy. It's going to be amazing. What Hindu University of America is doing is amazing. Let me open up a poll so you can let us know if you're interested in the course. We'll capture that information. Again, the link is in the chat. And then we have a couple questions in the Q&A box. The first question, let me put up this poll for everyone to fill out. But this first question, it's so basic and so I do want to ask you is, what is yoga? I mean, the true meaning.
In fact, we are going to see a variety of definitions straight from the Bhagavad Gita. In the Bhagavad Gita itself, there are so many meanings of the word yoga that is given. For example, one of the definition of yoga is samatvam. Samatvam yoga uchyate. Equilibrium of the mind, equanimous state of the mind is yoga. Another definition that is given relating to the action, yoga karmasu kaushalam. Skill in action or excellence in action is yoga. And then you find other definitions as well. For example, samadha vachala buddhihi tada yogam avapsyasi. That means when the mind is in samadhi, when the mind is in perfect equilibrium, that is yoga. There's also another interesting definition of yoga in the 6th chapter. Samvidya dukkha samyogam viyogam yoga uchyate. That means yoga is disconnectedness from suffering. Disconnecting ourselves from suffering and connecting ourselves with the harmony. That is also yoga. So you see various definitions of yoga in the Bhagavad Gita, and also we will consider definition from other texts as well. Patanjali describes as chitta vritti nirodha. This is a very technical definition because we need to understand what is chitta, which is usually translated as the mind or the mind stuff. And during the workshop, we are going to see the technical definitions of all these words. What does chitta mean? What does vritti mean? And so forth. So we will see all that. And additionally, we will also explore the dictionary meaning, the etymological meaning of yoga during the course. There are 3 root meanings of yoga, but we will explore that during the course.
Beautiful. That's a great place to start. Binoyji says that he's already registered for another yoga class. There's so many different ways that we're sharing this information. Keshavji asks, please explain pratyahara and how to do it.
So when we look at the meaning of the word pratyahara, it's composed of 2 words, 2 components, prati and ahara. So ahara literally means food. And in the context of yoga, anything that we receive from outside through our senses is also ahara. Whatever we see, hear, taste, smell, or touch, whatever sensory inputs that we receive in the system is also called ahara. So prati ahara literally means I am not going to allow external inputs to enter the system for a duration of time. You can think of it like a fasting. For the next 10 minutes or 20 minutes, I'm going to abide in silence. I'm not going to be distracted or disturbed by external stimuli. So this practice is called pratyahara. And in the Bhagavad Gita, we see some teachings around this topic of pratyahara, where Krishna describes this practice as like a tortoise that withdraws its limbs into its shell. Like that, in pratyahara, we withdraw our senses within so that it abides in the mind. And we will explore more on this and some of the specific practices such as the Shanmukhi Mudra. We are going to explore all that during the workshop.
Kamleshi asks, Karan Bandha versus Karma Phala, the difference?
Yes, Karma Phala is the fruit of action. So sometimes Karma Phalas are beneficial. In other words, we enjoy the fruit of action. We do something good and we receive a benefit, not a detriment. So that's a good karma phala. Whereas there are times when the karma phala is a suffering. So in that case, it becomes a bondage. So we refer to that as a karma bandha. Anything that restricts our freedom in the future is karma bandha.
Thank you for that. We've have about 90 people out of the 177 have completed the survey. Please take a look. Fill in yes, no, if you're interested in the course. We have 58 people interested in the course right now on this webinar. We'll call you to follow up. Usually courses aren't that big, but I think Shriramji will be able to manage, and we'll look for making it interactive and participatory. The replays will be available. We have a whole learning management system where Dr. Sarvatham will lay out week by week and have reading and all of that for you already laid out. We're doing this proper. What time is the class on Sundays? I'll drop the details again in the chat. It's at 11 EST, right? 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Eastern
Correct.
Daylight
On
Time right
Saturdays.
now. So hopefully you'll be able to attend. Yeah, Pacific 8 a.m. Mahendraji asks, how much emphasis will be put on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras and Patanjali?
So I would say about 15 to 20%, because we are going to use the Patanjali Yoga Sutras more as a complementary study of the Bhagavad Gita principles. So the main focus will be Bhagavad Gita, but for those topics where we can benefit by consulting the teachings of Yoga Sutras, we will do that as well. So about 15 to 20% of it would be from Patanjali Yoga Sutras. And also, I'd like to mention that about 15 minutes of each session, we will focus on chanting as well, because that is an integral part of this study. It's part of a swadhyaya, self-inspired study of the scriptures. And when we have a personal relationship with the shlokas, with the actual verses of the Bhagavad Gita, it will elevate our experience. It's going to be a more deeper study of the Bhagavad Gita.
We usually don't like to take anonymous questions, but I think this one is important. Other people are asking it also. Kind of asking, what does it entail for the student, right? And homework exercises, how many hours a week should a student be ready to commit to take full advantage of the course and your time and that overall kind of requirement for students? There's no prerequisites. We do encourage you to take orientation to Hindu studies. That kind of gives you a broader outlook, but there's no prerequisite for this course, so you can enroll directly.
Yeah, and the homeworks are going to be very simple. So no need to worry about, because already I know that most of us, the schedules are packed. So we don't want to add additional baggage. So the homework will be fun practices. And for example, there could be like a 10-minute of exercise of quieting the mind and writing a few journal notes about like when you go introspect and what do we discover is our swadharma and an inner exploration. And also there'll be some exercises, for example, engaging in a practice of 5 random acts of kindness during the week. So like that, we are going to bring to life some of the teachings in the Bhagavad Gita in this fun manner.
So let me just add, the yoga is part of all aspects of your life. This course can help you take that next step. I think that's what Shriramji is going for. That's what HUA is going for on this whole dharmic path. How can we share our Hindu heritage, wisdom, culture in whatever way helps you get on this road to moksha, right? Will Shriramji discuss meditation techniques as described in the Gita?
Yes, we are going to do that. In fact, we will see what are the step-by-step techniques, how to prepare for meditation, how to prepare the seat for meditation, how to sit for meditation, what do you do once you close your eyes when you sit for meditation, and what do you do when the mind drifts away? You want to quiet the mind, but then the mind is like a monkey that goes from one branch to another. So how do you handle such a distracted mind? So all this is described in the Bhagavad Gita, and we will see that.
This is a $300 course. You can't put a dollar value on the value you're going to get out of this course, though. But that's what we're charging, 3 units. That's kind of the structure. So that's going to be the cost of the course. The sessions will be recorded, and you can rewatch them, just like this webinar. If you registered for this webinar, we'll automatically send you a recording. We're not going to have you fill out the surveys anymore. That was unnecessary once you've already signed up. But during the class, yes, the class sessions will be recorded, but you want to participate live, you want to engage, but in case you can't make it, we will do that. How much time will you devote to teach different asanas?
So here the focus is more on the knowledge part of it, because in order to study and practice asanas, there are so many opportunities. There are yoga studios and yoga asana teachers everywhere. So the opportunity to learn asanas, there is so much that we have, but to go in-depth study of the Bhagavad Gita, perhaps we don't have that much opportunity. So the focus here will be on the study. We will look at the theoretical aspects of asanas. If you're already practicing asanas, that will be very helpful. Like, what is asana? How should we do the asana so that we derive the maximum benefits? All that we will study. But the practical aspect, do Tadasana or doing sun salutation and so forth, that we will not cover so much. The one asana that we will cover is how to keep the spine straight or in the neutral position so that the mind is alert and so forth.
Shriramji,
we will not be doing a yoga, full-blown yoga class, no.
In holistic yoga, I think that was fall 2019 or something, you did come in one of those courses and have a whole session on asanas, right? Yeah. And so HUA has different courses. We have a yoga for back pain with partners with our partners at Yoga Bharati. We have other courses where you can get into those. But this class is, as Shriramji said, is going to focus more on this aspect of the Gita and the yoga. That one, I'm going through questions. We still have quite a few more. We're only at 3:47. I think we're doing okay. Are there any specific publications that are mandatory reading? I do have a few translations to the Gita. Mandatory reading are, if you want to answer on that.
So I've selected a couple of books which are optional reading. So there is no mandatory reading because it's very easy to find the verses. There are so many free resources on the internet available if you want to look up the verses of the Gita. So one of the selected like optional reading for the Bhagavad Gita I've mentioned in the course is there's a book that contains the word by word meaning along with the declination of each of the Sanskrit words, which vibhakti and which dhatu and so forth. So if we want to understand the root words in each verse that we will examine, so that book will be helpful. And the author of that book, Winthrop Sargent. So this book was written several, I think 40 or 50 years back. And it has a very beautifully laid out word by word meaning along with the Sanskrit words, the declination, vibhaktis and so
forth. Nikita ji asks, can there be such a thing as negative emotion? Negative emotions, anger, despair, hopelessness, etc., are more often than not the most powerful vehicles for transformation, as we see for Arjuna. It's
very interesting because the very first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is Arjuna Vishada Yoga. Vishada means distress, the yoga of distress. It's very interesting to see the word distress and yoga together, right? Vishada Yoga. And the implication is that a negative emotion could be the starting point for a powerful transformation to happen. For example, many great yoga teachers, they stepped into yoga because they had some ailment when they were growing up, or they turned towards yoga because there was a problem. So the problem can be a stepping stone. It can be the first step towards a transformation. So the negative emotion can be used as the first step towards a transformation, just like we see in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna Vishada Yoga. In fact, each of the 18 chapters is a yoga. And it's very interesting to see that negative emotion can be used as well for yoga as the first step to transform the negative emotion.
Yeah, it will be a Chitraji, it'll be a class session, it'll be Zoom, like a meeting Zoom, you'll be able to interact. and it'll be an interactive session. Depending on how Shriramji wants to run it, maybe presentation and then questions like now, but except you'll be sharing the screen with him as a regular meeting, not a webinar as we are now, where attendees don't have their video or audio. That won't be the case. You'll be able to interact in the class.
That's correct, Ankurji. The first part, maybe 60 to 75% of the session will be like a presentation. And then the last maybe 20 minutes or so, there'll be question and answer session.
I don't know, Jairam Manji. Dual courses at the same time. I don't know if we're going to be able to change the time of this course or another one. We appreciate you taking other courses at HUA. I don't know, Shriramji. I don't know. I have to check the enrollment exactly and how flexible you are. I don't know. But if we can move half an hour this way or that way to accommodate 5, 10 students, I guess that would make sense. But I don't want to commit to that without touching base with you and Kalyanji first.
Sure, we can definitely talk about that. If a lot of people would like to have it at slightly different times, we can definitely look into that.
So Viniji, we already kind of went over the student part of it. Maybe if there's a specific question you want to get into, you can type it again. I don't know if Shriramji, you wanted to expand on what the student presentation would consist of.
I have some ideas about the final session where we are going to have student presentations. Of course, it depends on how many students are there. For example, if we have 100 students, then we need to organize the presentations in a way that everyone has the opportunity to present. And there are some ideas that I have. For example, one presentation could be to for each of the students to explore the Bhagavad Gita and pick one favorite verse and talk about it. Make a presentation out of it for 5 to 8 minutes, say, so that all of us can have the opportunity to speak on that. Or you can pick a specific topic, say the topic of tapas, or the topic of Vishada, which is like a negative emotion. So like that, you can pick a topic and select a couple of verses on that and make a presentation. Or it can even be reflective. In other words, how has this teaching inspired me during the course of the study? So how has it transformed me? It's like more subjective experience and sharing that as well. So I have many of these topics jotted down, and in the beginning of the course, I'll share with everyone.
How necessary is chanting shlokas? I know you mentioned it's integral, but somebody's asking again, and I just want you to emphasize it.
Yeah, the chanting is optional. What I would recommend is that even if you decide not to participate in the chanting during the class, perhaps some of us are not exposed to Sanskrit chanting before, so they could do it in their free time, perhaps. But during the chanting segment of the class, perhaps you can just listen. Listening itself is of great value. Shravana Abhyasa, it is called, the practice of listening. So that itself will have a beneficial effect.
Great. Arunji asked, there are different interpretations of the Bhagavad Gita. Which interpretation do you subscribe to? I'm like, the course, take the course and you'll understand how the different shlokas and interpretation that Shriramji is getting into. I don't know if you want to.
So that's a good point. There are so many interpretations because the Bhagavad Gita is like an ocean. And depending on what tools that we go to collect some water, whether we take it with a bucket or with a spoon, we get different parts or different facets of the Bhagavad Gita. And like there are Dvaitik or Advaitik or Vishishtadvaitik interpretations of the verses. But here, in this course, we are going to take the approach, we're going to don the hat of a yogi. So how do these verses benefit our yoga sadhana? And how can I be a yogi? How can it benefit me in the path of yoga is going to be our central theme.
So are you going to cover all 18 chapters in 10 weeks? How many shlokas will you cover? Is that already planned out?
So as you can guess, it's very difficult to cover all the 700. In fact, there are 701 shlokas of the Bhagavad Gita. And I'm sure you'll appreciate that 11 sessions are not enough to cover all the 700. So what we are going to do is, as I showed in the slide of the course plan, each session, there'll be a specific theme. For example, the first session, the theme is Dharma and Swadharma, because the first word of the Bhagavad Gita starts as Dharma, Dharma Kshetre, Kurukshetre. The first word is Dharma, and the last word is Mama. We saw that in the slide. So Mama Dharma, my Dharma, is what Bhagavad Gita expands on. So the first session will be on Dharma, and then the next session, there'll be a different topic, Sankhya, and then Karma, and then Tapas. So we will focus, we'll shift our spotlight on different areas or different practices in yoga during each session.
Great, great. Archana ji says they and their husband have registered. Thank you. Great. What was the optional reading again? Some people were asking about the author and the book.
Yes, so the book on Bhagavad Gita is, the translation is by Winthrop Sargent. Winthrop Sargent. And that's basically just a translation. There is no commentary, nothing. It's just a translation and a word by word translation. And that has benefited me greatly. Of course, there are commentaries, other books that present more in-depth commentaries. But here, for the purpose of our study, we are going to use this optional book, Winthrop Sargent. And then there'll be another book, an optional book for Patanjali Yoga Sutras. And I have not yet decided which book to select because there are a few of them. And once I decide, because I want to look for a similar kind of book for the Yoga Sutras that gives a word by word meaning. And once I choose that, I will share it with the group.
Great. Oh, sorry, I was unmuted. I was just looking up stuff. We have many classes during the week. I have just dropped our spring 2021 catalog. Thank you for typing in the name of Winthrop Sargent in the chat. For those who missed it, we still have the poll going, 107 out of 140 people left. Please fill that out. I'm going to close it in a quick second. Shriramji, maybe right at the top of the hour, do you have closing thoughts?
So I'd like to thank everyone for your enthusiasm. And I'd also like to express that I'm also a student of Bhagavad Gita. It's not like I'm a scholar or a guru. It's not like that at all. So I have a selfish motive of presenting this course because I am also going to learn with all of us. We are all going to learn together. And it's going to be a fun journey. And I have, in my own experience, I've seen that whenever I talk about the Bhagavad Gita, I learn a lot and I enjoy the process. And I hope that all of us together, Sangat Chadvam, we'll all go together and learn more and more, go into the heart of the Bhagavad Gita.
Beautiful. Shriramji, thank you. It has been a pleasure. The link to register is in the chat. We'll follow up and hopefully we'll have 50 students for you starting the second week of April. Shriramji, thank you. Dhanyavad.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Dhanyavadaha.